Welcome to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork Podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
Well, welcome to the Connected Teamwork Podcast, episode 50. I'm your host, Hilke Faber, and I'm with Scott Stalker today. And it's a real honor to be with you today, Scott. How are you today?
Hilke, thank you very much, sir. It's an honor to be here on your 50th episode. I'm doing great. You can see the background I have here as I sit with you at a rest station between North Carolina and Virginia as I move on to Washington, D.C. Honored to be with you today and talk about an important subject. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Scott. So before we introduce Scott a bit more, I'm going to say just a tad more about this podcast, and then I'll introduce Scott. So this podcast is called the Connected Teamwork Podcast, and it's about helping teams connect more deeply to what's most important to them. Often when we work with teams, we notice that there's moments of flow, which are enjoyable, creative, very productive, great things happen. And there's also these times when teams get stuck and they become disconnected from what's important, from each other, from things like the elephants in the room or whatever's going on is keeping them from doing that. So this podcast is geared to help people connect more deeply with some examples. It's like, maybe we can move through this situation a little bit differently as we think about an example of what we're hearing today. So I am really happy that we have Scott Stalker with us today. He comes to us with a deep commitment to service. He served on active duty in the United States Marine Corps for 31 years, retiring recently in August 2023. And while he was in active duty, Scott was the command senior enlisted leader for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the United States Cyber Command, and the National Security Agency. And in his final assignment, also with the United States Space Command. He served in multitudes of locations, including combat operations in Somalia and Iraq, and was assigned to Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command from 2010 to 2014. He has a bachelor's degree in intelligence studies and a master's degree in cybersecurity, as well as an organizational leadership certificate from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He also went to the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, where he became an SEC-DEF Strategic Thinkers Program as a capstone graduate. He's currently serving as senior consultant and executive advisor for several different corporations. He's a keynote speaker for high-profile events within the federal government, intelligence community, and national security sector, and serves on the boards of several businesses and nonprofits. He does so many things. This resume is very big. He also serves as a senior fellow for the National Defense University. He's also a board director person in the Wounded Warrior Project. And in the conversations I've had with Scott, what struck me was a deep sense of unwavering integrity and clarity that I find very admirable and has me sit up in my seat. So Scott, welcome. Tell us more about what you've learned in your life and leaderships in such a distinguished career for 31 years in the Marines about building connection in teams. Tell us about this.
Yeah, thank you, Hilke. I was thinking as you went through all of that, none of that's what can fit on your gravestone. And at the end of the day, what you want to be is a person of integrity, character, good father, friend, husband, wife, whatever that is. So while I do appreciate it, excuse me, I got attacked by a bug there. I do appreciate all of that. I really just want to be an approachable person that can add value. So as you asked that question about connectedness, I would offer, there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of art behind it. I'll just share with you how I've done it. and what has worked for me. So I did have my retirement ceremony there on the 7th of August in Colorado Springs. And the next day I woke up. Space Command continued on. They continued to lead and do great things as they always will. And I saw my wife, my 3 children, all young daughters, ages 5, 4, and 1 now. And I had my minivan. And I loaded them up, and I didn't have a job. I didn't have a home. I didn't have anything, except I had a connection with a lot of people, a strong network, a lot of people that I had engaged with who knew that I was getting ready to retire. Certainly, I had my family, and I had zero concerns. And some may say that's either naive or crazy. But the reason I was not concerned is because I had spent years building those connections. And what I would offer to the audience and those that are listening is the one thing you can never surge is trust. You have to build that over time, over sets and reps, over being there, over adding value. When people call on you, you perform, you exceed the standard. And so when I did retire, I told my wife, I said, hey, we're going to go do what we want to do, which was take a nice long vacation. We went to Canada. We saw a lot of national parks in the US. We saw family and friends. And the phone calls started coming for all of the things you mentioned, all of the board opportunities. I started my own company as well, which is why I'm heading to DC here in a moment. And consulting and advising and coaching, keynote speaking, all of those things and those opportunities came because to the left of all of this, I had built those connections and I had built it through trust and performance over time. And so folks may hear what you said about me and say, wow, that's impressive. And maybe it is. But the point is that anyone can do these things. Anyone can do that by building connections, by building honest connections, by having trust instilled in everything they do, instead of picking up the phone and say, I'd like to sell you a product. It's, hey, Scott's on the phone. I trust him. What does he have to offer? And that connection that you talk about is sincere, it's heartfelt, and it's built on a base of trust.
So how do you build that trust, Scott? I heard you say in an in-between sentence, these like reps and and when things go well. So how do you build this trust, and what have you learned about maybe when is it hard and challenging to build trust?
So how I built it really, over a long period of time was, I think, through performance. And then this other idea in leadership that doesn't get talked a lot about. But as a parent, I've really begun to understand this more, which is love. And what I mean by that is when you love the people that you work with, or those that work for you, or even those that you work for, when you do love them, there's this genuine care for their growth through their performance, but there's also another piece to it too, and that's accountability. Just like your children, right? They do something bad, you hold them accountable in different variety of different ways. Maybe they don't get dessert that night, whatever. The same way is you got to start by leading you first and holding yourself accountable first, so that when they come to you, your people or your bosses, they know that you love them enough to give them positive feedback, to perform, to add value to everything they do. And over time, that just continues to compound like interest. And people will realize Scott is someone we can call to deliver the keynote address, to tell me what I need to hear, not what I might want to hear. And he's going to help me at the end of the day. The best people in my lives have been folks that sometimes are misunderstood, but I see them and I know that they're going to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. I gave a presentation about 2.5 years ago for a group of senior fellows, very senior individuals there. And in the front row was a retired 4-star officer who has a reputation of he's a little harsh and rough, someone I love to death. And when we were all finished, everyone came up to me, Scott, great job. You did great. And that was nice, but it's not what I needed. What I needed was to hear from this individual. And I asked him later to give me some honest feedback. And he started with, hey, do you really want to know? And some may get nervous when they hear that. Oh my goodness, this is going to be harsh. And it wasn't. What it was here's a couple of things you can do to get better, minor things to improve. And I value that so much. And I've tried to be that for others as well, so that when they do something, I let them know you did a good job. And if you want to do a little better, here's a thing or two you can consider to improve. And so that's kind of how I've done this. The other side of this, you asked about how it's been to deal with those that are harder in life. Well, as a civilian, as a retiree, I certainly can say I'm just not going to deal with you. But when you're in uniform or you're in, you're an employee or whatever, you have to. And I have found trying to find areas where you have common interests are important, or bringing them back to why they joined the organization or why you joined the organization, so you can come back to the point where you did agree and then build on it from there. It's not always easy. That usually takes a little bit longer. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding of things, but again, through those sets and repetitions of time with one another, you can build that for those that are a little more contentious, if you will.
Yes. So sets and reps. Now I understood. My Dutch was getting in the way. So sets
Yeah,
and reps. Yes. So sets and reps. Over time, you build that dependability. And as you said, it starts with leading yourself.
right.
Now, tell us, Scott, a little bit about what might be some of the inner work that you've had to do and maybe continue to work to make sure that you show up dependable. I love that you said with love uh, in every moment for the people that you serve, which includes your family.
Yeah. So, real quick on the sets and reps. I used to be an amateur power lifter. I'm not there anymore. And we talked about sets and repetitions of certain weights at certain, intensity levels and that sort of thing. So, as you do that, you grow. But you can take that sets and reps and apply it to anything where you're trying to grow. So, how do I do it now? I use different tools. Certainly, I use LinkedIn, and I've grown a little following in the 2 years I've been on there. Um, but I think it's about brand consistency, and consistency in your message. So, for example, when I started my company, I decided it is going to be focusing on personal development. And within that, I'm dealing with national security topics because of my time in the National Security Agency, DIA, and other things. Personal development, so in coaching, and then personal development in keynote speaking. So all of that is what my brand is, and I share that with others. I let them know what I'm doing on LinkedIn. Every post that I do has an exact time that it comes out every single morning, so that's brand consistency. And I stay within that conversation lane. So I'm not on social media talking about used car sales, or hiking or things like that, unless it relates to my brand. And I would offer that folks that are trying to build their own brand ignition or recognition or do things as well to grow, you got to find out what your core value is. What are the things that you believe in that you're quote unquote selling, or sharing trust in, and then stick there so that you're not confusing the audience. Because if I were to start talking about the price of spark plugs, or those types of things, they wouldn't know, well, what is Scott about? Well, what I'm about is solving hard problems through my company that is focusing on national security and coaching and professional development.
I
And so
understand.
I
I
think that's
understand.
what I use. And LinkedIn is a tool. I share videos on my YouTube channel as well. I come on podcasts like yours, Hilka, and others. But ultimately, what I get a lot of is folks, veterans specifically, that'll reach out to me, and I say, let's have a conversation. Let's discuss how I can help you, what you're trying to do, and I do that as best I can. I'm going to do that for the next 3 days in Washington D.C. as well. And so it's being out there. It's putting yourself out there, right? You can have the cure for the worst disease in the world, but if you don't share it with others through brand recognition and advertising, likely no one's going to use it. So it's doing that, and it's not resting on the things that I accomplished in the past, which is why I don't go by my rank in the past. I admire and I appreciate the intro of what I have done, but that's not me anymore. I'm continuing to grow, and I'm dedicated to lifelong learning.
So inspiring, Scott. So you're not resting in the achievements from the past, which were, stellar, and you are exemplifying what I sense you help people with, which is to keep growing. We're going to take
Yeah.
a brief intermission in a second. After intermission, I'm going to ask you to tell us more about how do you motivate yourself to keep growing, and also what are some of the areas of growth that you are currently in, even at this very a mature and advanced stage of your career? So we're going to hear more about that after the break. We're talking with Scott Stalker, who is a coach, keynote speaker in personal growth in the security space as well. He's with us right now on his way to Washington, D.C., where he's going to do some of that work. And you've been listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast. See you after the break.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So we've been talking with Scott Stalker, very senior leader from the U.S. Marines in the past, currently retired and not retired at all, with his own company, coaching and focusing on personal development in the security space. So tell us, Scott, what keeps you growing and what motivates you to keep growing? And also, what are your growth areas about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Hoka, and it's really the one that folks should focus on. Not necessarily my answer, but their own. What keeps me growing? Certainly, my wife and my 3 young children, because I don't want to tell them how to be a great leader or a great person. I want to show them. I want to live the example, not just be the example, or talk about the example. So that's a key piece for me, and I don't want to downplay that. That is huge and important, because if I'm going to raise 3 young daughters to be women and productive members of society, to chase their dreams, I want them to see that it can be done. And so I'm working on that and being the best version of myself. As it relates to finances and other professional goals, I know exactly where I want to be in 15 years. I'm not ready to share that yet, but I know exactly where I want to be in 15 years professionally. I know exactly where that person works. I know the title, the job, and what it is. And if people were to hear about it, it would make them nervous, and it makes me nervous. It's hard to do this, and so because I want to do this, and that desire is greater than my desire to take long vacations or to sleep in every day or these other things. Don't get me wrong. I take a vacation. I took one 2 weeks ago. I get my rest. But I don't overdo it there, because I have great desires and I have a 15-year professional plan where I want to be in 15 years. And then I also have a financial plan, which I don't mind sharing. I just bought my home. I want to be able to pay that off very fast. I want to do that in about 3 years. Pay that off in about 3 years, because it offers an extreme level of freedom after that. I don't have any other debt. I paid my vehicles off and other things. So that level of freedom as well. And so those goals and aspirations, not just to be the good father and husband, but those others, are greater than my desire to eat a second serving of cake, to take more time off and these other things. So I'm working as hard as I can to be the best version of me to accomplish those things. And then the other piece of that is, when someone calls me, I want to be able to genuinely offer them great insight, great value, great advice. And I do that through working hard, through who I surround myself with, through the books I read, through the podcasts I listen to, and also the lack of things I do. So I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media. All I have actually is LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time listening to the noise and the rhetoric. I'm very focused on what I want to do. And anyone that's not interested in that doesn't get to occupy time in my life. And somebody say that's a little harsh, but I'm your guest today, and that's just me telling you my story.
I love that. Not harsh at all. To me, it's inspiring and clarifying. I sense a great deal of self-dignity and self-respect, which you also extend to others by staying true to what's actually important to you, which to me is one of the core components of connectedness, being very, very clear about what's most important to you and going for it. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about the shadow part of this, right? So the demons that you need to face, that you're facing, because I love that you said, my goals, my aspirations are far greater than those things that want me to maybe look for the comforts, right? I'm looking for the goals first. What are some of those things that you had to address in yourself to be able to do that every day? Because I can imagine some listeners listening to this thinking, that sounds nice. That sounds nice. I have big goals too, and yet things are not working out the way I want them to, or there's some other setbacks that I have. And maybe you can speak a little bit about what you've learned even from your time in the Marines about dealing with such difficult moments, not getting put off kilter.
Yeah, this might be specific to the veteran community mainly because that's where I come from. But in the United States, in most of the Western militaries today, we have what we'll know as a Napoleonic rank structure. You promote up, whether you were a corporal or a technical sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain, but eventually you move up the ranks. And there are historical biases and knowns to what each rank can do from an authority, legality perspective, but also what we just come to expect. I was at the senior enlisted ranks for almost 14 years. And so most of the bias that I dealt with was people would say, okay, that's kind of where that individual can go. And anything more than that either wasn't expected or those opportunities weren't presented to me. Whereas I worked with one of the most brilliant 3-star generals in my last command, who in my own opinion, I thought this person should have made 4-star and do other things. No one asked my opinion, so it didn't matter. But even he had a bit of a ceiling on some things. And so whether you are coming out of the service after 4 years or 40, most of us have this idea of this is where the ceiling is. And so I'm working through that right now, not focusing on changing perceptions, but I've been thinking through this. If I were to compete for a position with a general officer today, what are the things that I have that give me an advantage? What are the things that he or she has that gives them an advantage? And how can I close that gap and then go above that? Not from a perspective of competing with them, because I know a lot of them. They're really good people. They're brilliant individuals, and they took advantage of the opportunities presented to them. So this isn't competitive with them. This is internally competitive. And so how do I focus on making myself better? I have a coach that helps me with that. I believe in coaching. I believe in the value of having a coach, and I love coaching folks as well. But I needed someone to walk me through those things so I can close the gap, both real gap and then even the perception of that as well, so that I continue to grow and get better and improve. And if you take a moment to step back in your life, and Hoka, you and I are a little older than some of the younger generation today, and so we can look back and realize, hey, I made mistakes when I was younger. I didn't have that master's degree or the John Hopkins SecDef certificate or any of those other things back then. So I had to get there. And I think through it now. I've got 15, 20, 50 years to continue to grow and get better. My grandmother's still running around in Massachusetts. She's 99. I talk to her fairly often. She's still doing things. She reads. She takes a lot more naps. But my point is that you don't have to be stuck. You have to, if you want to go somewhere, know what your goals, dreams, and aspirations are. Get a coach, develop a plan, and pursue that. And if it's something you can't do today, that's good. That means you have opportunity to grow and get better. So that's kind of how I'm doing it today. And I guess we'll see in about 15 years if I've achieved that or not. I actually hope to surprise myself and exceed it.
And so you will. And so you will. I'm very struck by this idea of the perceived ceilings, and by others and also by yourself. So what would you say, as we're getting towards the closing minutes of this conversation, to a person that may feel a little, you could say, disconnected from their own possibilities, that may feel like, I've tried it. I'm not making progress. This is not working, but I still want to do this. What would you say to a person like that?
There's a couple things here. One is you want to know what you love and enjoy, and you also want to know what you are good at. I love and enjoy Major League Baseball. No one ever is going to call me and ask me to throw a Game 7 of the World Series because I lack the talent, and I know that. And I pitched my whole life. I could just sit and throw fastballs all day long, but as hard as I could throw, wouldn't even get me in the minor leagues or on a junior varsity college team. And so there has to be a moment of reality with folks as well. And I don't mean, okay, all hope is lost. You can't achieve your goals and desires. Um, but I needed to have that. It just so happens that the things that I love around national security and professional development and personal development are the things that I'm good at. And so I work hard at that. And so I think what folks need in their life is just an understanding of what do you enjoy in life, what makes you happy, and how do you pursue that, and don't be so harsh on yourself where you require yourself to get all this done tomorrow. It's the same thing if you got to lose 15 pounds. You didn't gain 15 pounds overnight, unless it was Thanksgiving, maybe. My goodness, Hilke, you know about that, our tradition in our country. But in all seriousness, you didn't do all that overnight. Give yourself a little opportunity to achieve your goals, to measure your effectiveness. And I think the one way that I have done this, and I'll share with your folks there, and I didn't initially understand this, but was in journaling. And I've started journaling because it gives me a chance to see how I've grown over time, right? If you're with your kids every single day, the next thing you know, they're 5'10", 6 feet tall, whatever. And you're like, how'd that happen? Well, you don't see their growth. But if you, and the same thing with yourself, you don't see your own personal development. But if you journal, you go back a couple of years and say, wow, I've gotten a lot better since then. And I'm slowly achieving it. And it allows you to measure not just your performance, but your effectiveness with that. And I think the coaching there helps as well. But a touch of reality, who you spend your time with, who do you allow in your top 5? Those are the people that you become, right? And so spending time with people that love the same type of thing, that are positive, uplifting, that are going to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. All of those things play into it. But I think far too often people want instant gratification today. And that's just not the reality. It's not. I love playing golf. I'm not good at it. I've been playing a long time, but I'm still dedicated to the art and to the sport, and to try to get better. And I know, Tiger Woods isn't going to have to worry about me anytime soon taking his spot, but I'm going to continue to play that and enjoy that. And so have fun, see the small victories in life, and then pursue things that you have realistic opportunities to get into. Just like me, I'd love to pitch for the Boston Red Sox, but it's not going to happen.
Be realistic, I hear. Also,
Yeah.
be patient and disciplined, and don't expect this thing to happen right away. I'm struck by the trees in your background and the trees in the yard that I'm looking out in the moment. And
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by the pace at which trees grows, and then seeing the canopy that they're able to support over the years.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, I'm seeing that as also the dedication that you have. So I can't wait to be a witness in seeing where you'll be way sooner than the 15 years that you've set yourself. If you've been listening, this has been a conversation about how do we stay committed to our growth, and also really be good curators of it, being able to take good care of it, find our motivation, being clear about where we're going, also surrounding ourselves with the right people that uplift us, and also be clear that it's not going to happen tomorrow. Or maybe it will, but that's not the goal. The goal is to keep growing and to celebrate that and to have some fun in the process. Scott, any closing words that you want to share?
Yeah, I would say, to those that are listening, for me at least, while I have a goal of what I want to do in 15 years, that's not the end state. The desire is to continue to improve every single day, to be the best version of myself. And so through listening to podcasts like this one, through reading, I think that's important. The one thing I'm going to do when I get to my hotel in Washington, D.C., is to do my best. I'll put my stuff away and get prepared and read my notes, but I'll make sure I get an hour of physical activity. And that way I'm ready to be the best version of myself tomorrow, to represent the companies that I'm going to be consulting for, to be articulate and ready for everybody. And so really don't think of this as crossing the finish line. You made it. It's a lifelong journey, whether you live to be 99 like my grandmother, longer, shorter, whatever. It's how do you consistently improve? Take a moment to audit your life and to see who's in your life: family, friends, podcasts, news, social media, all of the things that are in your life. Audit those. And anything that's there that's not going to make you a better version of yourself, consider either cutting back on it or getting rid of it in general. And when I say, things about, I use the dessert vignette. Hey, I love a good piece of chocolate cake too, but chocolate cake or the dessert is not ever going to be more important to me than my goals, dreams, and aspirations. And so it's about having positive habits of thought, habits of actions, which over time allows me to achieve more and become more. And so I just, as much as I would love to have another piece of cheesecake or whatever, if that's going to get in the way of me achieving my goals, I'll kindly pass, because my goals are far more important than my instant gratification on those things. So Hilke, thank you for what you do. Really love what the content you put out, all the positive energy you share with us. And I'm looking forward to, once this is out as well, sharing this with others. And maybe my mentors would tell me what I could do even better on this podcast. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Scott. It's been a true honor. To me, a sign of a great conversation is one that helps me sit up even more straight in my seat and makes me feel taller on the inside. And that is what's happening here today in committing and taking an audit. I like the precision in that. Taking an audit. Take an audit. If you're listening, take an audit. Maybe a very gentle yet firm audit. Is what's in my life serving me to where I am going, to where I intend to go? And is where I'm going, is that where I intend to go? Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Connected Teamwork Podcast. This episode was with Scott Stalker, senior leader, retired from the Marines for 31 years now, sought after keynote speaker and coach in the space of personal development and safety. If you like listening to these podcasts, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, and we're also live on LinkedIn. I'm your host, Hilke Farber. This has been the Connected Teamwork Podcast, where we help teams find out more about what it truly means to be great together. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.